When I first met my friend Mike, the birth of our duo, it was 22 years ago, and it was the day after the bombing of the World Trade Center. Remember how much of a fog we were in those days? For the first couple of years, I would only see Mike with our mutual friend Krishna, who introduced us. After a couple of years, Krishna moved back to London, and I moved across the San Francisco Bay so I could start seminary. And honestly, I didn't think that Mike and I would see each other again. We just weren't that close. We were acquaintances. But then I heard that his dad died. And I knew that his mom had died when he was 11, and that his sister lived in one of those big square states far away. And at that point, I still had both of my parents and 3 of my grandparents. It was unimaginable to me how alone he must have felt in the world. I was worried about him, so I reached out to him. And that was when we really became friends, in a time of great need for him and a time of great transition for me. We became so close that 5 years ago, he moved to Cleveland to be near us after he lost his job. He's still there, and we're here. But in the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about buying a retirement property together. Like, this feels real. Like, this is actually going to happen 10 or 15 years from now, but we're talking about buying that now. Friends like Mike don't come along very often. So, the thing is that now we're not just friends. We're family. We aren't connected by blood, but we're connected by something greater. The choice that we make every single day to have a meaningful, mutually committed relationship. I can count on Mike for anything. I've seen that kind of family a lot in my life. We've all heard stories about the early days of the AIDS pandemic when dying men were abandoned by their parents and siblings while neighbors and acquaintances assumed so many duties of caregiving until the end, even while they were denied hospital visitation, which was reserved only for the blood relatives. It was during that time I first heard the term family of choice, as in, she's not related by blood, but she's my family of choice. There were so many stories like that. So when I heard about that FX series, Pose, set during the early days of the AIDS pandemic, when voguing was all the rage, I had to see it. It's a really complex story that includes a few various families of choice with names like House of Wintour and House of Ferocity, complete with, and they compete in these ballroom competitions with all of these crazy categories like Femme Queen Realness or Executive with a Twist. And in this show, all of these characters are really, really young, and they've all been rejected by their families because of their queerness, and they're taken in by kids barely older than themselves. Often, there are a dozen people, young people, living in one small apartment, and they're all really young, and the 25-year-old is the oldest among them and becomes the person who not only chooses the house, the family name, but she calls everyone her child. So like a 25-year-old mom and a 17-year-old child. It's funny, I talk about this as if in the past, but it's not. Ballroom culture is still alive and well in New York City and all over the world. And I always thought that families of choice were the domain of LGBTQ plus people, raised feeling alien to their families and communities, then cast aside in a way that forces them to find their own tribe. But lately I'm realizing more and more that it isn't, as I hear about families being torn apart by politics or physically distanced because of jobs or school. Just Thursday, someone was telling me about going to college in another part of the country, marrying and settling there, starting a family, and then connecting with 3 other young transplant families. They became aunts and uncles and cousins to each other. And even though many of the younger generation is spread out across the country on their own now, they're still family 4 decades later. Does that sound familiar to you? You probably have your own experience of families of choice, and if you don't, you've seen them in literature and film and television. The whole idea has become kind of a trope, actually. Not just one trope, but a whole bunch of tropes. And I found out this week that all these tropes actually have names. And just hearing the name, you know the story when you hear it. The extremely loyal companion, the honorary uncle, the substitute parent, the band of brothers, friends forged by fire, family found at work, crime family, and my personal favorite, the convenient orphan. My first exposure to this trope was on the Brady Bunch. Remember Cousin Oliver? In the musical Rent, which I think of as the official Broadway musical of my generation, Gen X, the latchkey children who came of age in the 80s and 90s, the main characters, most of whom are artists isolated from their families, band together as they navigate the challenges of gentrification driven by new technology and trickle-down economics. All but one of them are poor, half of them are HIV positive, and the relationships between the couples are rocky even in the best of times. But they support each other, and they won't let any of the group go through anything alone. If you've seen it, you probably know that it's a modernization of Puccini's La Bohème, an opera set in Paris of the 1830s, with a group of friends forged by fire and plague. And going back even further than the 19th century, we can find stories of family of choice, the found family, in the book of Ruth in the Hebrew Bible, named after the great-grandmother of David. The story starts when Naomi and her husband emigrate with their young sons. Her husband dies, then her sons die. She wants to return to her homeland, and having no longer any legal connection, Naomi tells her daughters-in-law to go back home to their own mothers. And one daughter-in-law, Orpah, goes home. But the other daughter-in-law, Ruth, dedicates herself to Naomi. She says, "Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." These words are so covenantal that I've used them a few times in wedding ceremonies to provide context to the idea of making lifelong vows. And even though they were mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, it works really well with same-sex marriages. Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi were connected by a dedication to God. Their faith made them family in theory, but it was their choice in how to live their lives that made them family in practice. It's actually a common theme in religions across culture. After all, that's what religion is, binding ourselves together again and again, right? And like all religions, you use bind ourselves together again and again. That's literally what we do every time we recite our covenant together on Sunday. We aren't bound together by professing adherence to any one theological belief. We bind ourselves together because we want to. Partly because we like each other and feel a sense of connection and a sense of single-mindedness, but more importantly, we bind ourselves together again and again because we want connection. We want family away from home. Family we didn't choose for ourselves, but who show up when we need them. People who invite us to holiday dinner, bring us food when we're sick, or sing their hearts out at our father's funeral. I think that right there is why so many of you ask us in leadership for more opportunities for engagement, for deeper, more committed relationships with people you like, or you could like if you had a chance to meet. I have another friend from my San Francisco days, Eric. He retired a few years ago and moved to Scottsdale, Arizona. And like most professionals, most of Eric's adult friendships came from work. So in his new home, he didn't know how to meet new people to hang out with. So he did one of the most modern things I can think of. He hired a life coach solely to help him build a new social circle. And the life coach told him what she did a few years earlier when she was in a similar situation. She invited a few people she knew to dinner and let them know that it was just so that all of them could meet new people. And then she did it again with a different group of people, and then she did it again with another group of people, and she kept trying and adjusting until she got just the right group of 10 people. And then after a while, they started realizing they could do this in their own homes, and the group of people moved from house to house to house. They became part of each other's lives. They became a really tight group of 10. So there's two things I want to say about that. First is that gathering over coffee or a meal is perfect. It's limited in time, and you have something to focus on when conversation lags, or something to linger over if the conversation is stellar. And second, it required a few attempts to get it just right, and that's okay. So when Leah and I started kicking around this crazy idea of sidekicks, we knew that the pairings might not work immediately for any number of reasons beyond compatibility. You know, Lee has already tested this out among families, and it's already proven to be true. It might take several attempts to get the match right, largely because of logistics. But when it happens, it's powerful. Our goal with sidekicks is to facilitate connections, not to dictate them. We aren't going to tell you what to do or when to do it or how to do it, but we're going to do our best to provide opportunities for you to engage and connect, things like dinners and outings. So pay attention to the social calendar of the congregation. The thing is that especially as we get older, making newfound family can be hard, even when we have a way of meeting people. Hard enough that E.B. Johnson, a therapist and life coach, has 5 steps that she says we must engage in if we want to have happy, healthy families of choice. So I want to share those with you. She says, first, figure out who you are. Before you can find people who appreciate you for who you are, you need to spend some time figuring out who you are, which requires honesty. And the great thing about that is that it's a chance to explore things that interest you, things that you want to share. And second, get clear on your essentials. Know where you come from and where you want to be. What kind of family did you come from? How has that made that into who you are? And what do you expect from a family of choice? Third, set boundaries for yourself. Setting limits around what you are and are not willing to do or to give will help ensure that you follow through on your commitments and promises. Healthy boundaries will make you the kind of person people want in their families of choice. And fourth, make an effort with those who match up with you. And matching up doesn't mean having the same life circumstances or levels of education or income. Matching doesn't mean being the same age or gender or sexual orientation. Matching means caring about each other enough to be united in mutual respect. Matching is simply wanting to be part of somebody else's thriving. And finally, lean into who you are. If you're matched with the right person, they will want you to be your best, no matter how kooky or quirky that is. They'll be thrilled to see you becoming you becoming more of who you are and who you're meant to be. Now, the really cool thing about found families is that they don't share any of your history. They don't share any of the baggage that goes back generations. you can create a new future together. And they don't have an investment in making you be who they need you to be. It's a great chance for a new start. True found family, true sidekicks are companions dedicated to helping each other be themselves. As I like to say, your sidekick will help you be you. So come, be a sidekick for somebody and see where it takes you. And in the meantime, come sing a song with me now. Number 346 in your